Welcome to our small business series all about brand identity. We're really excited for the small business series. This session is done in partnership with SCORE, so they brought us our amazing speaker. But this whole series is sponsored by PSECU, so we want to thank them for their support. They've allowed us to offer this to you at no cost, so that you can take all this in. This is your first small business series. We do offer them monthly. We have different topics every month. So next month is project management, and then we are continuing to plan throughout the rest of the year. So please stay tuned to that and find out all the information on our website. We'll push it out to you. But to get started, I'm going to pass it over to Catherine from SCORE to say a few words.
Thanks, Abigail. My name is Kathy Bonser, and I'm the education chair at the SCORE-Lancaster-Lebanon chapter. And we're committed to helping small businesses in the community to build their business plans, grow their businesses, and optimize them as they get started. And so partnering with the chamber is an important partnership for us in reaching businesses in the community. And we're also pleased to partner with Kinectiv, and Kinectiv has worked with SCORE and the chamber for a number of years and helps many small businesses in the community. So the topic that they're going to discuss today on brand identity is really one that small businesses need and can use to support themselves as they build and grow their businesses. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Mark at Kinectiv and let you introduce yourselves in today's presentation.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Abigail. Hi, I'm Mark Reinmiller. I'm the account director here at Kinectiv, and as Kathy pointed out, we're a local marketing agency located right downtown by the square. I'll let Josh and Zach introduce themselves as well.
Hi, I'm Josh. I'm the artistic director here at Kinectiv. I have a heavy hand in all the branding projects that we work on, layout, design, and just concepting what that all looks like and how it should be used.
Yeah, and my name is Zach. I'm from another location, remoting in, as we all are, but my role is design director. So I'm heavily involved in sort of the visual aspects of how brands get executed across multiple channels, whether that's through video, through web, and just assisting with that entire kind of cohesive process of bringing a visual identity for a business to life.
Right, great. And so thanks for joining us today and spending your lunch hour with us. Unfortunately, we didn't bring any food to share with everybody, but hopefully you have some at home. We'll try to keep this light, keep it conversational. You know, branding is a really large topic, so we're going to touch on a lot of different things today. And then at the end, we'll leave an email address where you guys are welcome to reach out if you have any questions for further information. But let's talk a little bit about who we are and why we're here. Just really briefly set the stage for why we're going to be talking about this. So as I mentioned, we're a marketing agency, and what we feel is that everything really, when it comes down to branding and marketing, is about communication. And so that means talking to your audience, connecting with your audience, and being able to convey who you are. And that's a pretty broad topic, right? And so that's one of our focuses. We work with a lot of different organizations of different sizes, local, regional, and we really help them work on their brand, their identity, and then how they convey that to their audience and the people that are interested in attracting to their business or organization across the board. You know, it can be in print materials, digital media, video, photography. Those all kind of play a part. That's what we do on a regular basis, and why we're excited to chat about this. Let me go to the next slide, Zach. And so this is just a quick, you know, when we say what we do and what falls under that marketing realm and how that relates to branding, this is just a quick snapshot of all the things that kind of fall under that I had mentioned, you know, identity, online presence, you know, there's content marketing, social media, photography, and film, but there's a lot of strategy that goes into it too. And so this is all part of what we believe goes into branding, and that's a lot, right? So we're not going to touch on all of this today, but we'll touch on some of the key points. These are some of the businesses that we work with, just to give you an idea. We're not just here talking about this stuff saying, here's what you should do. We actually put this into practice. We get the chance to work with some wonderful organizations and businesses locally. We're all Lancaster based, and we really do enjoy being able to interact with our community on a business level and on a personal level, and really see the impact that these efforts can have. And it's exciting to us to have the opportunity to partner with businesses like the one you're seeing on the screen. You know, helping them and getting them to a point where they feel comfortable how they're presenting themselves and what their brand becomes for them is really something we are thrilled with. And the opportunity to do that is great. So let's get to what we're here to talk about today, branding, right? So I'm gonna kind of start off with a little bit of just an overview and talk about what branding is and from our perspective, what we think it includes. And then we'll kind of touch a little bit more on some of the components, the brand identity itself, online presence, website, social media, things like that, and how they all work together to actually create your brand identity. So what is a brand, right? So you've heard me mention a couple times now that includes a lot of things. So you might hear logo, an icon, a word mark, tagline, maybe a color scheme, or a color palette. There's the website, there's social media, videos, video content, blogs, products. And the answer is yes. All of these things actually play into defining a brand and creating what a brand is and how people interact with it. And, it's not just us who sees it this way, and not just us that sees it, but it's more than just a logo or a color scheme or an icon. This is kind of how it's seen across the board. And so we thought we'd ask a few other people that are pretty successful or have had some success in that realm, tell us their perspective. So Scott Cook, co-founder of Intuit. So if you've just done your taxes with QuickBooks or anything along those lines, you might know who Intuit is. But a brand is really no longer what we tell a consumer it is. It is what consumers tell each other it is. And that's really a key point here, because either you can have impact on this or you can leave it up to the crowd. And I'm pretty sure you'd know what the better option is there. You want fans and you want an audience that supports what you do and tells others about it. But if you're not part of that conversation, that can really be a disadvantage especially when you're trying to get established and get yourself started in the business realm. And Seth Godin, who's one of the most prominent speakers and authors in the marketing industry. A brand is a set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that taken together account for a consumer's decision to choose one product or service over another. And so we're assuming that that's a big part of this for everybody watching today is, you're out there trying to create a service, a product, or offer something to the community, and how do you get inside their mind? How do you become what's top of mind? And this is key to that. It's more than the logo. It's more than how you present yourself on a business card or your social media profile icon. It's how you present who you are, and what you mean to them. So why is this all important, right? So again, this is the foundation for success. This is really what is going to be the differentiator between you and other businesses, other competitors. And the question here is, what can a brand do? So over the last 10 years, this has changed significantly with the advent and the explosion of the internet and digital, and especially the mobile phone kind of explosion. Things have changed dramatically. People are accustomed now to being able to interact with a brand on a regular basis. The brand almost becomes a person to them. The organization becomes much like they would speak to somebody that they know via social media or via text messaging. They're actually conversing with these brands, and many large brands and national and worldwide brands approach it this way. They become almost a persona, right? And that's how we see it. So it starts with some of the foundational pieces, the look and the feel of the brand, but it's got to evolve into more than that. And so when done well, it gives you that opportunity to kind of establish a relationship, right? And a brand is a logo, it is a word mark and an icon, but it's so much more than that. It's a combination of that, other visual elements like a style guide, color palette, textures, all of that works together to create a visual identity. But then you even go beyond that, and it's the tone of voice, type of messaging, the type of content, your online presence, and branded content. So that could be collateral of all kinds, print materials, billboards, all of that is really part of your brand. And so, as we kind of pointed out, there's a huge benefit to doing that, to making sure that you have that thought out. It can really help you establish yourself, get into a market, get into the position to attract new business, attract new followers, attract new fans. But when it's not done properly, it can really hinder. It can really give off the wrong impression. It can give off a bad first impression. It can look unprofessional. And maybe right now, as everybody's probably aware, competition is at an all-time high, right? For most industries in all areas. And so what you need to do is set yourself apart. And one of the disadvantages of not having a well thought out brand or brand presence out in the real world is that you're allowing the consumer or the audience to really determine what they think of you with no input from you, right? So the time and effort put into this really does pay off, and it's really worthwhile. If you don't take the time to do it, you're leaving it open to the consumer or somebody who may or may not have had a good experience with you or a bad experience with you in the past, or a misunderstanding of what you're actually offering. So there's an opportunity here to kind of set the groundwork, set the tone for who you are and what people think of you. Most important factors here are done well. It should help establish trust. It's really building any relationship starts with trust. People want to be able to feel like they're familiar with who you are, what you do, and what you offer, and what that means to them. So a well thought out, well crafted brand that includes all of these things. It includes a visual identity, a content strategy, presence online, presence in the real world, really helps establish that. It's a familiarity. People want to feel that way. The logo, the brand, the identity can really be the face of a business. If you think of the first time you meet somebody or you come in contact with somebody, one of the first things you recognize or see is their face, and that tells you a lot about them. It tells you, what you might expect, their personality, what they're thinking, how they're feeling, and that's really what a logo and a brand can be for a business when done well. And when it's positioned properly and used to its extent, of capability, you can really turn people into fans, which is really the key. We use the word fan, but it's an advocate. It's somebody that speaks to others about your business, tells your story, helps amplify your message, and it gets people to be aware of who you are. That's really one of the key points of an effective brand. And it does help you express who you are, why you do what you do, and what it means to other people. I'm going to pass it off to Josh here. He's going to talk a little bit about one of the most important components, which is that brand identity, which encompasses everything and anything you can think of that's physical, tangible, and kind of sets the tone for what a brand is.
Yeah, so one of the first key things to start with here is, what is brand identity? What does that mean? Everyone has their own perception of what a brand is. And everyone has their own different assets and things that they use to market and promote themselves. And it all just depends on the type of business or organization that you are a part of and that you're helping to run. Like Mark indicated earlier, it's so much more than a logo and a color. It's all encompassing. A brand identity is everything that you as a company, you as people stand for. It's hitting on every touch point, from the second somebody comes across your brand on a website, to the interaction they have with an employee of yours, to the experience that they have walking into, let's say, your store or your office. So it's all of those things. And the brands that do it the best have established over the years this ability to just be consistent across the board, and to create this broad base of people that are dedicated towards these brands, that are advocates of them, that speak highly of them, that become fans, that become followers, that engage with them, spend their dollars with them, because they feel trusted, they feel engaged, they feel excited about that particular company or that particular brand. So Zach, let's move on to the next slide. So a consistent, thoughtful brand identity is an important part of your sales strategy and business success. The three key things really is, and we've already touched on this, earning fans, building equity, and being remembered. We recently just had a client in a meeting several times mentioned that he feels like he has weapons now, because we built up this rebrand for them. We've established all these different assets that they're able to use, and he can keep coming back to us with thoughts and ideas and creative suggestions, and he knows that he's got people capable of bringing those to life, and he's got all these assets, video assets, design assets, messaging, everything that he now has at his disposal to sort of go out in the real world and really make his brand shine, really make it elevate and capture a broader audience than what he's had before. So that was just really cool, just the way he sort of worded that, and it was sort of unique. And we sat back and said, yeah, that's a pretty cool way of sort of describing what that's like when you have all these things at your disposal. Let's talk about sort of the key differences between that are used in branding terminology. So let's go to the next slide, Zach. So there's three key words that you hear a lot: brand, branding, and brand identity. And really, when some people might get them confused, but there is different meanings for all three of them. Brand is our perceptions, the world's perception of what a company is. So I can have a perception of a company like Nike or Apple. And the reason I have that perception is because they have dedicated so much time, so much effort, so much resource into building their brand so that the outside world perceives them a certain way, and wants their product and wants to be associated with that brand, with that product, and obviously use it in their daily lives for like all sorts of things, business, entertainment, all sorts of things like that. Branding, we like to say, is an action verb. It's actually shaping your identity. It's being in the process of creating it, of actually doing it. We like to say that really branding never stops. Even once you have an established brand in place, it doesn't just end there. It's going to keep going, because as time goes on, technology changes, trends change, and so you got to constantly be aware of what's going on. You got to constantly be working on your brand, so it doesn't get stagnant, so it doesn't get stale, so that it remains relevant, and keeps your audience engaged, keeps your customers in your base engaged. And then brand identity really is the combination of, like I mentioned earlier, of everything that would encompass a brand. So it is logo, it is color palettes, it is your imagery, any kind of videos you're using, it's your social presence, it's your web presence. It's all of those things that combine to create your identity. It's like your fingerprint. So if you picture it this way, a brand identity is what makes you special, what makes you unique. Each of us are different in so many ways, and it's trying to establish what is your niche. What makes you stand out, what makes you different, and really honing in on that so that you can stand out from the rest of the competition that's around you. So let's go on to the next slide, Zach. So a proper brand identity is, from the very outset, thought in terms of, what is this going to look like now? What is this going to look like in the near future? And then how can we build this to be relevant long term? So 5-10 years from now, what does this look like? Is what we're building now able to be built on and adjusted and adaptable for the changing times? And obviously we've experienced a lot of that over the past year and a half, just with being, a lot of us working remotely, having to do all this stuff through Zoom calls and Google chats. So just the shape of how we're marketing and how we're branding right now has altered drastically just over the last 12 months. So here I'm going to go through real quick 3 different examples of some brands that we have had the privilege of working with. And these demonstrate sort of the different ways that, depending on who you are, depending on your services and products, depending on your company, will determine how your brand identity needs built and what will be included in it. So every company and every service and product is different and unique. Somebody like the Ephrata Public Library here, they are focused on education, they're focused on community outreach. They are heavily involved in the community, unlike any library I've ever come across. They offer all sorts of services like fingerprints and passports. They help homeless people. They help people with all sorts of mental issues. They have lots of educational programs for children, for adults. And they even have shuttle service buses, for people that need to be, bused from here to there. So they do a whole gamut of things. And so obviously their services and, how they're helping people is drastically different from some other organizations, just because there's so much that they are involved in. It's not just about going into a library and, taking out a few books and DVDs. It's so much more than that. So one of the things that we had to figure out from the very outset is, well, what is their theme and how can we carry that through to all their materials? So for them, the big thing was establishing this theme of adventure and journey and exploring and learning through life and experiencing all these different things. And how does that help you grow? How can we be more engaged in the community? How can we help everyone, no matter who they are, no matter what types of services they are? Once they come into our library, we want them to feel this way. We want them to experience this. So a lot of their assets were built on this idea of, like adventure and exploring and learning as you go, and helping yourself. So we even went into, a process with them where we built out character designs and we created animations to help sort of push this idea of all these different services that they are offering to the community that might not be aware of all these things that they're actually doing. So the next example coming up is Fulton Theater. We've been working with them for the better part of the past 5 years, and we've really helped them solidify their brand. One of the things that we do for them is we have to create all of their artwork for every single season, and not just the artwork, but we have to be thinking, how is it going to be marketed? And they're solely based on, experience design. They want people to experience what it's like to come into the theater. They want people to leave having a good time, learning something, being entertained, experiencing something that maybe they haven't before, giving them, a 2-hour, time in their life where they can just forget everything else that's going on in the world and just focus on the people on stage that are performing. So, great music, lights, awesome, sound effects and things like that. So one thing that we have to do, and that a company like this has to do, is they have what I would consider a sub brand for each and every show. They have to have a certain look, feel, and identity for each show that they produce. And when they're marketing that, those marketing materials have to reflect the image and what people will experience when they actually watch the show. So everything from the photography to the actual art design for each show, towards like how they are relevant on social media, how they are presented through their website. We established style guides for each show, color palettes, fonts, all the different elements that would go into all the marketing materials needed for those shows. And we, photography, we help with video for all the shows, and then we put together a bunch of like commercials for TV and for social media. So obviously they're drastically different from the needs and desires of Ephrata Public Library. It's just completely different, but this is the Fulton's way of establishing their identity. And then the third and final example we have here, this is Cake and Cup. They're a small little bakery in downtown Lidditz. And when they came to us, they were just in the process of having a brand new name, and they needed a brand established. So a place like this, they're selling high-end cakes and pastries and cookies and different drinks and coffees and stuff like that. So their needs are drastically different from Ephrata Library, and they're drastically different from Fulton. They're focused essentially on their customers in downtown Lidditz and on tourists that come into the area. They're just looking for a good treat. And so we went in knowing that a lot of this stuff had to look and feel the same through their website, through their products, through their stickers. We created stamps for them, all their packaging, all the way to what you experience and what you see when you walk in their doors. So their actual environment reflects what their brand looks like if you were to see it in a flyer, or you were to visit their website, or you were to follow them on social media. So they are just a great example of an all-round great experience and hitting on every single touch point anytime you come across from their brand. And I can attest that, and you experience what it's like to be in that environment. And when you deal with their employees, it all reflects who Cake and Cup wanted to be. And they built up a very strong reputation in the area, and they're a more popular type of place to go to when people want those specialty cakes, or want just to have a craving for a sweet treat. And so, as you can see, just through these three examples, they're so drastically different from each other, and they all have their different needs, but they all had a roadmap for what their brand identity needed to be, and all the different elements that needed to be combined and put into place in order to bring it to life. So, they all have logos, they all have color palettes, they all have different fonts and textures that are being used. different types of imagery, but the way that they have to market them, the way that they have to use them are different from each other. So a big thing is just keeping that in mind based on who you are as an organization or a business or a company, and really honing in on what is your audience, who are you tailoring your services and products towards, and what do you need. So at the end of the day, brand identity is something that absolutely should be well thought about, should be invested in with your time, with your finances, and with your energy, because it's so crucial in today's world to just sort of set yourself apart. We're inundated day in and day out with just so much stuff that is vying for our time. And when you have a plan in place and you establish it and you put it out there into the world, you want to make sure that it's the best, most effective it can be, so that you can set yourself apart, so that you can stand out, so that you can broaden your audience and broaden your customer base. So I think we're good to move on to the next section, where we're going to dive a little bit into how that extends to social media and web presence.
All right, thanks. So I'll kind of take over here then and talk a little bit more about the brands in action, right? So Josh did a great job of kind of talking through everything that can go into establishing that foundation for a strong brand identity, which again is really just so much more than just a logo, or so much more than a word mark or an icon. But once you get that established, who you are, how you're going to present yourself to the outside world, what do you do with that and where do you go with it? And obviously two of the most prominent places would be a website and social media, or the online realm, right? So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit here. We'll start with the online realm and the digital world, and talk a little bit about how brands can kind of take advantage of that, and how they can use that to actually continue to refine their identity and make it more three-dimensional, more tangible to the audience. So, being online is really crucial. It's to be visibility for growth, for establishing who you are. And at this point, the online world and the real world have kind of melded to a degree. I mean, people are on their phones all day, every day. They don't think of it as being online anymore. It's part of their day-to-day life, right? So a big part of that playing field is social media. And so what you're doing there, or sometimes what you're not doing there, can have a big impact on your brand. Consumers really have become accustomed to being able to interact with people directly. And I mentioned that earlier, because they're looking to have conversations, to ask questions, to try to establish a relationship with businesses or organizations that they're interested in interacting with. So they look for that on social. So that's why there's such a great opportunity for you to establish your branding, define your branding, and refine your branding there, right? Social is a place where you can explore and expand your visual identity. You can go beyond the logo and the color scheme. You can explore patterns, icons, textures, and even photography, and how it's styled and used can speak a lot about a brand. So we'll go to the next slide then. So you really want to think about that when you're approaching your brand on social and on different platforms. You want to use intentionality. Visual continuity, visual consistency is important. You don't want to vary it up so much that people don't know, what's your style, what's your look and feel, because once you get that familiarity there, that can really help them notice you in a feed. I'm sure we're all used to just scrolling up and down on a phone. It's what people do now when they're looking for content. Sometimes they're just passing time. So that little bit of cue as to who you are and how they can recognize your content can go a long way. That stems from that initial branding foundation, the look and feel of the brand. A content strategy can also go a long way for establishing what a brand is to someone. What's the tone of voice? What type of content do you talk about? There's all sorts of things to consider. And I think that you can give thought to, are you more focused on entertaining and being social on social media, which is a big part of it? Are you more focused on answering questions and providing value? You can find a nice mix of both of those, but how you approach those things really does deepen the brand identity in the eyes and the minds of the consumer. Go to the next one. So when we talk about the visual continuity and how you present yourself, the social media really is probably the most prominent top of funnel place for most businesses or organizations. That's where people are discovering a lot of new businesses, a lot of new content, a lot of new opportunities, right? I think there's a statistics, 83% of Instagram users are discovering new businesses on the platform. And that's changed dramatically over the last few years as far as how people discover new brands, new businesses. These tools, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, things like that, are really changing how people discover and find new businesses. Take advantage of the opportunities that a social media platform can provide. There's built-in tools, there's custom call to action buttons, there's all sorts of things that can allow a platform that you might see as just something people just spend time on, but it really is an opportunity to brand the business and brand your identity in a way that makes it feel real to the audience and the consumer. Go to the next slide, maybe. The strategy we talked about, I touched on it briefly already, but that's a big part of this. Beyond what your brand looks like, how does your brand act and interact with that audience? A little bit of planning can go a long way, and a little bit of thought can go a long way. Don't just hard sell, don't just promote yourself, but interact and develop that personality. One of the most popular topics or examples of that is if you're familiar with any of the fast food chains on Twitter. If you're not, you want to have a little bit of fun and enjoy it, just go take a look. Wendy's, McDonald's, Burger King, they have developed this completely separate personality from the actual restaurants on this platform where they kind of bicker back and forth and poke fun at each other. And that from their perspective, that's deepening who they are and kind of connecting with people on a much more personal level. And so there's an opportunity for that, right? You can look for ways to just share in the entertainment and social side of it with memes, contests, trivia, inspiration, quotes and testimonials, education, connection behind the scenes, really showing them who you are and what you're doing. There's a lot of opportunity there, and people identify with that. It's a reason why reality TV has taken off the way it has over the last 10 to 15 years, is people love to see that side of things. They love to see what's actually going into something and what happens that maybe they don't know about or aren't aware of. You have the next slide. So voice, that's another big part of this. What is it like to have a conversation with your business? And that is one of the most defining, or can be one of the most defining parts of a brand's identity. When I mentioned the chain restaurants, or the chain fast food places, and they really defined a voice. They're very snarky, they're very tongue-in-cheek, a lot of sarcasm, a little dry wit. But that, you probably wouldn't think of that when you would think of McDonald's or Wendy's, but that's what they've cultivated there. And that's actually helped some of them see a resurgence in the younger audiences. Whereas, there's an argument that younger audiences are moving away from fast food and chains. They're moving more towards healthy food, which is a great thing. And these brands have found a way to make themselves a little bit more relevant again to these younger audiences by developing that kind of persona online. And again, the important key here is finding out what's true to your organization. You don't want to become something that you're not. It's more about amplifying what you are. Go to the next slide. So that just touches a little bit on social media and opportunity to do outreach. And another big part of this, and a real key part of this, is your online presence, right? Your online real estate, your website. And that's probably one of the most impactful pieces of property that you have to establish your brand and reinforce your brand and interact with potential businesses. So I'm going to hand it over to Zach, who's going to chat through that a little bit more and talk about some of the key points there.
Yeah. So as Mark touched on a little bit there, websites can just be a phenomenal kind of home base for your brand online. Yet in a lot of cases, they are kind of underutilized or undeveloped tools. And specifically with small businesses that we've maybe worked with in the past, or just we've seen trends in smaller businesses questioning kind of their validity. And so today we just want to address a little bit of some of those common conversations that we've had and talk about how websites, from our perspective, really do play a large role in kind of your branding strategy when it comes to how you start to see that brand operate in action and in the real world. So first off, are websites, really necessary? There's definitely some statistics that I think have started a little bit of a trend that's following on the heels of some of these new tools that we have around social media that frankly are still being kind of figured out how they all fit together, since a lot of this stuff is very new and has evolved quickly. But we see, less than 2/3 of small businesses, actually have a website. 41% of businesses without websites say that they don't think they need one, and 35% feel that their operation maybe is too small to warrant having one. And so, when you look at these types of numbers, it's easy to maybe think that maybe social media is the new website, and that there's a shift away from them. However, a little bit more of a realistic evaluation tells a slightly different story on kind of why websites are still vital for the growth of a business. They are indispensable tools. The other digital marketing efforts, whether that's ads, social media, consistency with posting, all of those types of things, but they do lack the ability, like I said, to be that home base for your business online. On all of those platforms, there are competing voices, there are distractions, and there are also limitations that are imposed by those platforms, which we'll get into a little bit more in a moment. But for all those reasons, smaller businesses are recognizing those shortcomings, and larger businesses have always recognized the validity of investing in websites. And so, it's never been a decision that people have regretted. Over 90% of business owners that have websites, feel that they do contribute effectively to their marketing strategy. And similar percentages, of people in general, 93% begin kind of their search on a search engine if they're looking specifically for a business rather than on social media. We talked about how people are discovering businesses on social media because that's where they're spending time. But when they're actively seeking out a business, it often begins still on a search engine platform rather than on social media. And close to a third of small businesses that don't have websites plan to build one this year. So these are all just, I think, helpful to recognize the context for why we're seeing some of the development in this area of branding and what websites maybe really are, and how we're starting to define them better in the context of what they offer in an overall branding strategy for your business. So what does a website offer you, and how can you really leverage the power of a website for your business? Well, there's a few things we'd point to as kind of key areas that should be thought of as far as what they can offer. First is control over content. As the business who has a website, you are in complete control of what is said or not said about your business online. There, good reviews can be showcased in really prominent ways. Maybe voices that feel less helpful can be hidden, negative reviews, that sort of thing. But then also just down to your personal attributes, as a business can be showcased more effectively. What's unique to you? How can you stand out? Those things can be amplified really well by designing specifically for them on a website platform. Secondly, you can create credibility. 77% of customers say that they feel a website makes a business appear more credible. And 86% of consumers would also, prefer a business to have a website rather than just social media. And that really does also funnel down into just that trust factor of, people prefer even just businesses having custom email addresses versus something that's a free domain like a Gmail. It just creates that credibility that sets people apart. I mean, to create any social media platform or any free email address, that's a very low bar to entry. But to have a website, again, starts to show that you take yourself seriously, and that others should as well. So it's a great piece in separating yourself and giving yourself that credibility in the market. It's also a very powerful tool for creating leads and generating sales. Websites do allow you to build very specific landing pages, very specific pathways to online shopping, contact forms, and other conversion metrics that really turn engagement into sales. These social media platforms really are built around creating engagement and conveying personality and starting those conversations. But when it comes to an overall brand and the way that people experience your interaction, I think websites really are that piece that allows you to funnel your users into a more intentional kind of sales funnel that will increase value for your brand and enhances the overall brand experience for the people that are coming to you. And then lastly, you own the real estate. These other online platforms such as business listings, social platforms, they're owned by someone else. They have the freedom to change what they are and what they do at any time. They often offer limited data such as analytics, customer behaviors, all those types of things. And ultimately, they are restrictive in what you can do to communicate your brand. They are usually templates. They are usually very specific in what you can and cannot say, how much you can say, how little you can say, and there's just a little bit more of a cookie cutter feel to all of that. Whereas a website really allows you to expand everything that Josh has talked about, everything that Mark has talked about your voice, your personality, the colors, the way you feel, all that stuff can really come to life in your owned real estate. And that is crucial in kind of the bottom line of what websites, I think, give people, which is this opportunity to connect with your brand, and subsequently you're building brand loyalty through them. So whether that is the immersive visuals, whether that's, having your brand's colors, your voice, your style, all those things prominent. I mean, the bottom line is that what you're able to do through all those things is create something that is memorable, that stands out from your competition, and ultimately strikes an emotional connection. That is the most important thing that a brand can do. It's to keep you top of mind, set you apart, and to create that level of loyalty that when people think of the types of services that you offer, they think of you. And so that's where a website can really give you an advantage in conveying those things. Whereas without that, your online presentation of what you're doing, which really, like Mark mentioned, has gone so far beyond just an online experience and is really just a way that people are interacting with your brand on a daily basis, especially in our more remote world. These are vital things to invest in. So to kind of summarize, the real challenge with websites and the opportunities that are there is not necessarily whether or not the website should exist. It's the the quality, and also the content that's presented. A lot of businesses invest minimally in their websites. They'll use free tools or DIY tools, and these can actually be a detriment to the overall brand. Josh touched on this a little bit earlier, but a brand that's done well reflects to the professionalism, the intentionality, and the credibility of who you are as a brand. And the same goes for the website experience. So there's a huge tie between what people associate with the quality of your business and what they experience in the quality of your website. So there's a few other statistics here that just talk about that a little bit. Just really the idea that a website is judged often on its overall aesthetics, and people form opinions about the quality of that website, which then in turn reflects the quality of what they perceive your business to be. And websites need to be fast, they need to be efficient, or people will leave. And there's a lot of pitfalls that can come with a poorly thought through website, and it reflects a lot on the brand itself. And so really the challenge is an opportunity when you recognize that there is sort of a little bit of a gap between what these tools can do for a business and how many businesses are actually taking advantage of them to their fullest extent. So if those opportunities and avenues to pursue are taken advantage of fully, and a business invests in really developing that online presence, it actually is a huge opportunity to set that brand apart, and to be a standout voice in what is otherwise a very saturated market for most businesses, and a world that we live in right now where attention spans are short. People are vying for attention, and it's a noisy marketplace. So yeah, we think that all these things, of course, are cohesive. It's not just about a website. It's not just about having social media. It's not just about the actual collateral and the advertising. It's all of it working together. You're talking about one large message. And so with all that said, we do want to leave a little time at the end here for Q&A. I will pass it to Mark just in case there's anything he wants to say as we wrap up, and we'll go from there.
Okay, yeah, thanks. As Zach mentioned, obviously we know there's a lot of stuff we touched on and kind of bounced around on a couple different topics. So we'd really like to just leave some time to address a few questions and see if there's anything in particular we can dive into a little bit more specifically.
So we do have a couple of questions in the chat feature, so I'm going to read one out at a time and just allow all of you to kind of give your input. So someone asked if you can discuss the branding, and brand identity as it relates to a service business that are typically based around a founder's name. So a landscaping company, a gym, counselor, etc.
Sure. And I think first and foremost, like one of the most important things to say here is that all these things we're talking about and all the topics really, it may not seem that way, but they really do apply regardless of the name of the business or the style of business. It's just you have to apply them a little differently based on those types of businesses, right? So Josh had mentioned that when he went through some of the examples of like the difference between, you know, a coffee shop, bakery versus a theater versus, you know, a library. And so for a service-based business, what changes maybe is the ability to be a little bit more real and personal. But I think at the end of the day, the components are still the same. You want a brand identity. And if it's based on a person's name, then there are those instances where that name ends up being used as a logo or as a visual identity. But again, it becomes a little bit more about building around that, right? And so maybe as marketers or designers over here, it's hard for us to kind of separate the two, but we see them basically the same. We do have some clients that are, you know, we have a landscaper that's a client of ours, and we have a gym that we've worked with and a physical fitness company. And so they are based on individuals and things like that. So we approach it the same way, really. What changes is, you know, sometimes a smaller business, something like that, doesn't have the same budget or the same ability to approach all of these things. So it's really about finding what's the best way to start out, what's the best way to establish yourself, and focus on being able to create something that's tangible and tactile that people can kind of understand. So if it is, you know, a person's name, a person's, you know, they are the business, then to a degree, they have to build that brand around them.
So someone asked that for a small business, they do handmade products with very limited funds. What would you recommend is the most important brand identity step to take after already having a website? Is it photos, social media engagement, etc.?
Another really good question. And, you know, I will say this with a grain of salt, but keep in mind a lot of this is perception based, right? So I think if you were saying what is the most important, I think we're just saying handmade products without knowing specifically what they are. I think it's a matter of, definitely photos will help. But then the question is, what do you do with those photos? So you have to take them on, you know, they should be on your website and on social media and things like that. But you will see a lot of that type of product. You take advantage of other platforms like Etsy. So it's finding where people are and finding where people have an interest in what you do. If there's already a community for that, spending your time getting in that community is important. So Facebook, Instagram, you know, they're visual in nature for the most part, so you can share that stuff there. But you might find a little bit more, if you're talking about what's the most impactful, it might be establishing that type of presence. And again, I'm speaking in general because I don't know specifically the type of products, but, you know, Etsy is a pretty prominent marketplace right now for those types of products. And so I think it's, you know, if you're saying there's already a website established, it's finding where you can go and find groups of people and crowds of people to kind of get them to learn about you and get familiar with you.
One thing I would add might be
Sorry, go
important
ahead.
even through like YouTube videos, like doing videos of like what, the products that are being created that this person is creating. What are the materials and like how does she do it? Some people might find that really interesting too. And that's just, something that everyone's just doing with an iPhone now, in setting up and doing these quick little couple-minute videos and posting them on social media and building out, their presence that way so that people can see the people behind the service or product, and they can see the details that maybe in the time and effort that goes into it to making these things. So
yeah, I think one thing that is crucial is, like Mark talked about, find where the people are, and then also like Josh is talking about, just what is it that's going to connect with them. It goes back to when we talk about sort of a plan for how do you bring your brand to where people are, especially like with social media, for example. That content strategy, what is it that you can start to show people that creates value and sets you apart from what other people are doing. And it doesn't matter whether you have a $5,000 a month budget to put towards professionally made videos, or you just have an iPhone. The content strategy still applies. If you're going to make videos because that's what people are doing, then that's great. And so it's more about understanding your marketplace, your playing field, and then how do you strategically showcase what you're doing that's unique and personal, and would make you stand out.
All right, so I'm going to combine two questions that we got because they kind of feed into each other. So someone asked about how do you build your brand from your target customer perspective versus your owner or founder's internal perspective. And someone else asked about establishing a brand voice and not allowing your personal voice, whoever else is kind of running that voice, to kind of bleed into that.
Those are good questions because, and I'm laughing because I'm like, well, the answer is, there's certain things that, that's ideally, if you have the opportunity, you work with somebody outside of yourself, right? And that sounds like a pitch for working with a marketing agency like us. But I think really what I'm saying is it doesn't matter who it is, but one of the easiest ways to do that is to just chat with somebody else, right? So if it's just a matter of, how do you establish something and not get stuck on your own thoughts? I mean, first of all, I think that's really insightful. So I think whoever, if you're thinking that way, you're on the right path, right? I think we see this often where businesses don't think that way. And they are very focused on their thoughts and their opinions and how they feel about things, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's your business. If you're going to take the time to do this, by all means, you should feel good about it. But I guess what I'm saying is when it comes down to branding, if you think of a lot of the stuff we've said and what branding really is, it's creating a connection and relating to people. And I think if your mindset already is, how do I make sure to not make this too much about me? You're already well on your way to being ahead of where a lot of other small businesses and some established businesses are. So what I guess I would say is, if you look at the component of it, that's how do you reach your target audience or think from their perspective. One way that's not always accessible, but one way is to, if you have some current clients or customers, just ask them, get an understanding of why they used you, bought from you, support you. Just hear them out, and you'd be surprised sometimes what people will offer. Agencies like ours sometimes do that, whether they do focus groups. And I'm not saying as a small individual you need to run a focus group, but again, that personal connection of just chatting and asking somebody. And I think you can also give some thought to look at similar businesses and similar services and products and how are they presenting themselves. Sometimes it's just about learning how that sector or that marketplace kind of interacts, what their lingo is, how they approach things, what they talk about, and you can learn a lot from there too. As far as the second part of the question was, can you remind me?
Had to do with voice. So how do you separate your own personal voice from the brand voice? And then also someone just asked about separating to kind of create a cohesive brand voice. If you have more than one person who's interacting on your social media, how do you kind of create that cohesive language?
So I'll take it real quick, and then if Zach or Josh want to add anything. So the voice is kind of what I was saying about, like, you know, you can get some exposure to other similar businesses or people in that market sector, or you know, if you're a coffee shop, what do other coffee shops talk about? What do they sound like, right? That's one way to do it. The other, you know, when you talk about that multiple voice or how to one consistent brand voice, a lot of times what that starts with is some sort of messaging guide or some sort of internal, you know, guide of what it looks like for the brand to talk. And large brands have those things. They, you know, the books, you know, like, this is how we say this. These are the words we don't use. I'm not saying you have to go to that extent, but there is thought that goes into it. But you will often see brands that allow different people in the business to take part in their messaging and voice, and that becomes part of their brand. You know, so-and-so from this brand, when they post on social, they kind of leave the little tag, like, you know, their name at the bottom. So I think it depends on how you want to approach that. If you're hoping to have it be kind of consistent in one, I think that comes from having some general guidelines that people can follow, and making it clear to people what you'd like the voice to be and what the tone of voice could be.
Yeah, those are tools that we've worked with establishing for brands that we run content for, that we're writing blogs for. But that's certainly something that you can develop kind of on your own, even down to things like whitelists and blacklists of just certain phrases that should or shouldn't be used, that can start to influence a little bit of more specifics and granulars that can be helpful references in starting to establish direction in that way. You know, whether you encourage your writing style to, you know, not use proper capitalization and to use heavy emojis, or to be very very articulate in the way that things are worded, and to use specific industry terms. You know, those are things that you can outline, and you know, these things can be as granular as you want them to be, but it really comes down to, you know, how far you plan to scale it, because that is ultimately what it is it's like one person taking their hands off and it going to a larger body of people who are more or less ghostwriting, and establishing that voice through multiple authors. And so, yeah, the personality, I think just it's about how wide of a team are you going to be working with, and how tight do you want that to be.
So probably one last question before we have to wrap up is, what are your thoughts on validation or affirmation of branding concepts with target customers before you finalize your full brand identity?
So I think similar to the last question, when, you know, can you bounce it off somebody? Can you get, so I think it's important and it's helpful. Is it, you know, do or die? Probably not. And one of the things I was thinking here was, you know, especially when you talk to small businesses, startups, individual sole proprietors, probably one of the key things to take away from this is that this is all wonderful things to think about and ideals. But in the reality of the real world, it's really about just being authentic, being real, and you'd be surprised how forgiving the public really can be when you're just being genuine. So establishing this stuff, building it, and taking the time to do it is something that you have the ability to do. Obviously, in a perfect world, you take the time to get everything set up before you get out there and you start running the business, but that rarely happens. But branding, as Josh kind of pointed out, we see it as an ongoing thing. So even from our perspective, you know, an agency that looks at this as something we craft, it doesn't start and stop. It starts and then it just keeps going, and you keep working on it. And most of our clients, we work on their voice and their tone and how they present themselves, and they evolve. So I think, you know, to kind of circle back to that question about how important is it to kind of validate it, it's important to get perspective. I don't know if I would say you need it validated, but there's no harm in checking with people that you know you're hoping to be able to interact with. If you have the ability to do that, it's just an additional benefit of saying, well, I didn't create this in a vacuum, or I don't, you know, I'm not making this decision on my own and assuming it's going to work. It's great to hear people's feedback. So I think to the extent you can, any outside feedback and response is always great. And, you know, that's something that we try to do in our process a lot, whether it be, you know, we have a relatively, you know, sizable team that we can bounce stuff off around internally, but then we also do check outside of that team, because it's not even just all about us, you know. And so I think it's an important step to take if you can.
Yeah, the big thing I would add is just to always remember that you won't please everyone. And so you're going to run into situations where you're going to have people that voice opinions that are contrary to each other, they're contrary to your gut feelings. And so again, like Mark said, all those things are helpful data points, but especially if you have a more limited sample size of voices, just remember to take it with a grain of salt and take it as input, but not necessarily as Bible on what your brand should and shouldn't be. So I would just add that as a caution or a clarifier.
No, that's perfect. I think that's going to wrap it up for today. So I want to thank everyone for their questions and thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to present and sharing all your information with us. We really appreciate it. We also want to thank our Small Business Series sponsor, PSECU, for bringing us these presenters and allowing you guys to enjoy their content. This presentation is recorded, so you will get a copy of the recording as well as a copy of the presentation after this is over today. So with that being said, I want to thank everyone. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we hope to see you guys soon.